if you think about the assets that have been transitioned from one generation to the next, depending on the report, there's up to $15 trillion worth of wealth transitioning from one generation to the next over the 10 to 15 years.
Wow.
Into the hands, I would say, mostly of people who are unprepared for it. And so if we think that is true, that even if it's a fraction of that transition, what difference could it make for that wealth to go into hands of people who know how to have great impact with that wealth and know how to make it sustainable? It's a massive multiplier effect. So I feel like even the work with a few families I do can have a massive impact on the world. And so if we can multiply the number of families we're working with, we can multiply the impact.
Welcome to the Cultural Agility Podcast, where we explore the stories of some of the most advanced intercultural practitioners from around the world to help you become culturally agile and succeed in today's culturally complex world. I'm your host, Marco Blankenberg, International Director of KnowledgeWorks, where every day we help individuals and companies achieve relational success in that same complex world. Welcome, everyone, again to another episode of Unlocking Cultural Agility. And today I have a dear friend and colleague with me, Andrew Doust, who has quite a unique job, actually. And it's all about families and culture. So I am very happy today that Andrew has walked into our mini studio here in the office. So welcome, Andrew. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So it is a unique topic, but it's still on the topic of culture, something that, of course, at KnowledgeWorks we're very passionate about. But tell us a little bit more about yourself, the mini version, the short version, and then we'll go into the topic of today.
Well, if it's not clear from my accent, I'm Australian, but I have lived in Dubai for a while. I came here for 3 years, 18 years ago, like many I stayed. And so now I work here, based here, but actually work with families of wealth all around the world. And so Plenitude Partners, my firm, we work exclusively with families who have accumulated significant resources and are now working out how they navigate and, I guess, work with their family with those resources.
So that's indeed quite a unique, it's almost like a niche in terms of specialization, maybe. How did you drift into this?
That's right. Well, to be clear, I don't work on the money side. I work on the relationship side. And my observation was a few years ago, when I was working in a family office, that I kept meeting families who were very successful financially. They'd accumulated a lot of success in their business and portfolio, but actually they weren't doing well on the things that really matter. Things like their well-being, their happiness, their family relationships. I thought, well, actually, the business and their wealth puts a lot of pressure on those things. They have a plan for their business. They have a plan for their estate. They have a plan for their tax. They have a plan for everything else, but not a plan to ensure their family flourishes and thrives in the midst of their success. And so I thought, I wonder what it would look like to help those families. And so then I created Plenitude Partners and launched now what I'm doing with process we'll talk about.
Right. It almost sounds like, it's one thing to advise somebody on their finances, on their estate planning, etc. It's a whole different thing when you need to get personal. Why aren't more people doing that?
That's a great question. Well, I think it's easier to give people the solution around their money or around their legal structure or around their estate plan or, what they do with their will or their giving. In some ways, that's an endpoint. You say, well, here's a piece of advice. Here's a plan. Now go execute that. But when it comes to relationships, it's a different story, isn't it? And it involves our emotions. It involves our fears, our anxieties, our hopes, our dreams. It involves hurt and the way we've treated each other in the past. It involves so many things that are complex and aren't easily addressed, and certainly usually not addressed without some help from a person like me. So I think that is just, it's not obvious what people need, but even when it is, it's not easy to help people through a journey of really personal growth and family growth. And that's really what this is. It's a journey, not a destination.
Right.
And so what I take people through is not really an endpoint of a report, but a process to help them grow stronger as a family and as individuals so they can navigate whatever their future looks like.
Yeah, and we've had the privilege now of working together quite a bit. And from the beginning, really, our desire to have a meaningful transformational impact in people's lives in the relationships they have, starting with the relationship with themselves, but also the desire to build healthy families in your case, or healthy cultures, because a family has a culture, even if they've never thought about it or haven't intentionally worked on it. So we'll talk more about how that synergy is growing, but why is building a healthy family culture, why is it so important?
Well, maybe if I just start with two stories that give an insight into this world that then bridges into culture.
Great.
I usually ask two questions of families when I begin working with them, and even to decide whether I'll work with them. The first is, what do you really want more of? What do you really want more of? And for these families I'm working with, it's not more wealth. They have plenty of it. I mean, they obviously are working to create more, but it's not what they really want more of. And then what do you most fear? What do you most fear? What are you anxious about? And so in answering those two questions, I get to the heart of what really matters to them, and what they feel like they need more of and what they're most anxious to avoid. I remember one gentleman, when I asked him, what do you really want more of? With tears in his eyes, he said, I really want my family to love each other more.
Wow.
He was so, I was sitting on his lovely yacht, and but it was clear that what he most longed for was that. He had missed that in his family. He was missing that in his family. Another family said, we really want the brokenness to stop. They had broken marriages through their family. They were running a very significant business, and they were finding that it was broken in relationships. And so I guess the bridge to culture is this, that many of the families that have built something significant together have done so on the back of hard work, of resilience and tenacity and all those sort of things that go into building success. But along the way, they've lost something. They've often lost something. And that is some sense of who they are, a sense of the love they long to have in their family, a sense of caring for each other in the way they'd like to. And so the reason culture matters is that those things that influence our family, the drive to succeed, often are not the things that sustain our family. Those things are often lost. And so I think culture helps us be intentional about shaping who we want to be as a family, not just what we want to do and what we want to achieve as a family. And that cultural element has to be called out, and has to be intentional, and families have to want that as much. The culture of love, trust, forgiveness, respect. They need to want that even more than the success of their business. Otherwise, what's the point?
It sounds like, at least at a high level, you're almost, you said the families I want to work with. So there's a process of back and forth there. But it's also taking people back to more of an inside-out approach. Would that be a fair thing to say?
Absolutely. I think that's a really good way to put it. When I speak to families, I'll say, listen, this is going to be an extraordinarily difficult process. It's going to take time, and it's going to be painful. And I need you to know that unless you're willing to do some inner work, and not just your children, but you as a founder or founder, father, mother, or couples, you actually need to be prepared to do the work of transformation yourself. Because if you won't transform, the family won't be different as a result of this work. It needs to come from within. So yeah, very much a personal transformation journey. Another reason why I think a lot of people don't do this work.
Wow. So at a macro level then, take us through sort of the main stations along the way. What does it look like? What does a process or a journey like that look like?
Yeah, so when people engage Plenitude partners, we take them on a journey. And the journey begins with the individual. So we have a 4-stage process, which of course, flexes a little bit for families depending on where they're at. But effectively, the process is me, we, where, how. Me, we, where, how.
Okay.
So the how work is I'll start there briefly, because the how work involves things like doing our estate plan, working out our investment plan, maybe doing our charitable plan, things that
Which is what other people typically do.
Absolutely.
A lot
what most of this industry revolves around those things, and that's where people do most of the work. But the problem is that if you do that how work without understanding what the family wants to achieve, it won't really work. And so the good advisors in that space will certainly work with the family and say, what do you want to achieve? But most of it's done in isolation. So the estate planner may not necessarily be talking to the chief investment officer and his or her responsibilities in that space. And so there's not alignment in all of the how work. But even if you have a clear vision from a family about what they want to achieve, if the family is not functioning well, they're not going to go anywhere.
That totally makes sense. Yeah.
But if the family can't function well, if the individuals in the family aren't confident in themselves and have a sense of their own purpose and well-being. And so what we do is begin at the beginning, which is the me. We do a lot of work with the individual. We help them with some profiling. We get them to know themselves better, grow in confidence, and maybe become more self-aware, so that when they come to the we table, the conversations with the family, they can actually do that with confidence, and we can hear every voice. And the we conversations are really about building trust and communication and defining the values and culture of the family, how it's going to operate together. Once they've got that, they can then look forward to say, where do we want to go? What do we want to achieve together? Yeah. But it's also collective and individual. We need the family collectively to think about that. But if the family collectively isn't also honoring the individual, then that doesn't work. So we need to help the individuals work out their future and the family work out its collective future. And even whether there will be a collective future, because it's not always the best thing to have a collective future, at least financially. And then finally, once that's clear, it becomes a lot easier to do all the how work. The how work falls out of that. And you can brief your advisors more clearly. You can actually get alignment on all those things. So that's kind of the overview of the process.
Yeah. Fantastic. So you alluded already that in most cases, multiple generations are involved. That also means these generations have lived a very different life. They might have a very different relationship to the wealth of the family. What are some of the challenges that you see either across the generations or in general amongst families, the families you work with?
Well, the families are forged in the battle to survive, in the battle to create something, usually their business of financial worth. But having established that and won that battle, these families are not likely to be poor anytime soon. The next battle is to ensure that the comfort that provides doesn't destroy the ingredients of the success. And so that is one of the challenges that actually, for the founder, maybe if I use the word G, it's generation 1 and 2, for example, they know what it took, the sacrifices it took to build something. Yeah. And for them, building that thing, that business, was more important than anything, often than family. And that has its own challenges. But actually, when they see the next generation coming, say generation 3 and 4, for whom that isn't their reality, they think, well, why don't you love my baby as much as I love my baby? Why aren't you willing to, sacrifice everything for its existence like I am? And the reason is because by the third generation, they're saying, well, the business and the fruit of the business, and by now it's probably a portfolio of businesses or investments. It's more than just one thing. By the third and fourth generation, they're saying, well, your purpose was to build it. And so you were sort of serving the business. The family was serving the business. Now we want the assets built to serve us.
Right.
We want to actually use these assets as a tool for what we want to achieve ourselves. And so, of course, the next generation have different dreams and aspirations. It's not necessarily the same dream and aspiration as the founder. And so that clash is really significant. This desire for more meaningful contribution myself as a generation 3 or 4, to do something I'm proud of, to create my own thing, not just inherit somebody else's. Imagine if you're raised in one of these families, say, congratulations, your job is to basically continue my job. And you say, well, I don't want your job. I wanted to make my own job. I wanted to make my own success. Thanks very much. Yeah. And so that tension, you can imagine, plays out in lots of different ways.
Yeah. And in performance management, one of the things we always see is that good people want to be measured. And if there's nothing to measure you by, then that becomes a point of tension. So what's the spectrum there? Is it some people they get born into it, and you see a lot of easy riders in the movies, for instance, born into wealth and just run, enjoy it. But then you see others, maybe on the other side of the spectrum who might say, I don't want to have anything to do with it. I want to make my own way, or make my own mark. What do you see amongst those generations that follow?
Yeah, no, I mean a really wide spectrum, and it depends in part on the culture of the family. In some families, and one I'm particularly thinking of, the expectation was that the children would follow in the father's footsteps and would do what he did and give everything to the business until it was decided that those children were not necessary anymore, and they were effectively discarded from the business. Having thought that their life would be all about a role in the business, at one point they were just put on the bench and said, not needed anymore.
Wow.
And so you can imagine them living their later life thinking, I'm a spare, I'm not even a spare. I was just put on the bench and forgotten about. That's crushing. And so there's that sense of I failed because I couldn't make it where I was most expected to. That can be very debilitating. And sometimes people are put into roles where they shouldn't be given that responsibility because they're not capable or suited for it. They have other passions and gifts. And then you'll, of course, have others who see their future as completely secure because they've got all the financial resources they could ever dream of. I think the stereotype is that we have these spoiled kids who just live off the fat of the past. That there is certainly some of that, not usually in the families I work with, because I think it's self-selecting. Families I work with don't tend to have that as part of their culture. Most families are concerned about that. Most kids actually, I think, want to prove themselves. Most kids want to actually make something of themselves. The battle they face is that they're always in the shadow of the achievements of the past. So whatever I do is not going to match up to what grandpa did or grandma did. Because theirs was such significant achievements, at least in one sense, financially. What can I ever do? So you can see for many, they start life feeling like whatever path they pursue, they're going to fail because it won't match up next to the ones that have come before them.
And it's fascinating just listening to you that, we often think of, if only I had a little bit more money, if you don't have it. But then listening to you, it's like once people have it, it comes with a whole bunch of problems and challenges. How does that then impact the family culture? What starts happening when these people start, pulling in different directions in their relationship with wealth and relationship with one another? How does that play out in a negative way?
So I'll just comment before I answer that. The comment on the complexities of wealth, because I think it's important to understand that. Yes, for most of us who don't have what these families have, it looks like our lives would be much better with more.
If only we.
If only, And so if onlyism is a real thing, isn't it? If only I had this, then I would be happier. And so what I want to encourage families to lean into is the idea of contentment, which is not circumstantial. Contentment, which is based on the science of flourishing, which says actually good relationships, enough but not too much income, the opportunity to strive and do something for myself and to taste achievement. These are all things that Harvard and other schools have researched on to talk about what flourishing looks like. So we want to understand the idea of what flourishing looks like first. And then if we actually understand that, then we'll be less obsessed by how much I have or how much other people have. But in the context of family, inevitably, people are comparing. How much does my sibling have or my cousin have, or why did they get that opportunity and I didn't? And I think what happens is that the money or the opportunities to be in the business or to play a part in the family, that is really a proxy for love. Am I really loved? Am I really accepted? Do I have to perform to earn my place?
Right.
And so that idea of performance that people feel in order to be accepted drives so much of, I think, the unhealthy cultures in these families where they are wondering whether they are good enough, whether they'll ever be really accepted enough. And also whether if somebody has more, that's because they are loved more. So yes, there are some very unhealthy dynamics that run through families like this when you have this abundance. And you'd think, well, the abundance is all they want, but actually it's the comparison that starts robbing the family of some of the joy they could have. There's a great phrase, you may have heard it, that comparison is the thief of joy.
Wow.
The thief of joy. Most of the families have more than enough. In fact, all of the ones I work with do. But if somebody has more than I, and the reason to me looks like because you were favored and I wasn't, that's pretty destructive.
Yeah. I'm reminded as you speak of something that my mentor from Singapore used to say. He's 84, 85 years old now. He used to say, does it add value to you or do you add value to it? And he was always saying, if it has to add value to me, maybe money or a car or a yacht or whatever else, we have an unhealthy relationship with it.
Yeah.
So we talked about some of the challenges. Do you have a story of sort of a turnaround where that unhealthy environment of family said, we don't want this anymore? You even started with that today.
Yeah.
What does it look like when that gets turned around?
Well, a couple of stories I'll share. One is with a family I worked with where the siblings approached me to ask for some help. And when they described their father, who was in his 70s, and they had a fairly large business still do, I thought, I'm not sure if their father is going to want to do this work. It was one of those situations where I thought the kids will benefit, but the father probably won't want to engage. Mm. And so we agreed, and the father actually agreed, that I would work with the kids. The kids were in their 30s. And so I was working with them for about 3 months. And I said, listen, I think at the beginning of this, if we do this job well, your father is going to look at the changes in you and he'll be intrigued and maybe want to get involved. And so sure enough, in 3 months' time, I get a call from the father saying, what have you done to my kids? They're talking to me. They're listening to me. They're respecting me and they're respecting each other. There's a change in energy. There's a change in their manner that I'm intrigued by. Can I get involved?
Wow.
Which is great. And then I worked with the father for about 3 to 4 months on the similar things that I'd been doing with the kids. And towards the end of that period, I get a call from the kids saying, what have you done to our dad? He's not who he was. Wonderful. He actually listens better. He wants to know our opinion. He's willing to, be receptive to our ideas. It's not what it was. And so, I worked with that family for a couple of years and still do on and off. But it was a really clear turnaround in their relationships that then had a profound impact on their role as owners together. And so even though no family is perfect, of course, they continue to have a much better relationship and a much better functioning family unit that then can own and run their business more effectively. One brief story. I was running a family retreat in London a few years ago, and it was the end of it was a culmination of about a year and a half work with this family who own a very significant business. And the patriarch before the workshop, and this was a whole family workshop, so 3 generations were together. He took me aside before the workshop. We were at the hotel I owned, and he said, listen, I need to tell you that, this has been perhaps the most painful and invasive and difficult processes I've ever experienced.
Wow.
Nobody has asked the questions you've confronted me with. It has been at times really distasteful. It's not a great start to the workshop. And then came the but. And he said, but it was absolutely essential for us to be where we are today.
Wow.
If it wasn't for this, we couldn't have this meeting as a family. And he said, thank you. And actually, he did that in private, but actually even more significantly, in the workshop, he repeated that sentiment to the whole family, which was, to me, a really great evidence of the turnaround in that family. Again, every family needs to keep working on this. It's not like you go to the gym, get fit, and then stop. You have to keep working on it. And the families that do, they succeed.
Well, in our work, we see that no matter who you connect with, you're always building culture.
Yeah.
And the question is, are you intentionally doing that in a positive way? And the same goes for families.
Yeah.
Every time they meet, they're building culture.
And so they're the disciplines of culture, aren't they? Because the ingredients, the behavior that got people to where they were successful, as I mentioned earlier, is not the behavior that will sustain families. And what wealth enables is greater isolation, greater independence, greater separation from each other. They're the enemies of creating culture. How can a family create culture if they never see each other, or if they are so independent they don't need each other anymore?
Yeah.
And so if we want to build family culture, we have to rediscover and actually be intentional about creating those things that build culture. So
that's pretty profound.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know it's always dangerous to ask, can you repeat those? But the enemies of culture. Yeah, independence, self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
No need to ask for help.
Don't need to ask for help. It's I'm self-contained, and of course, culture is all about being effective collectively, more effective collectively than we can ever be individually.
Yeah.
And I like to describe too culture as kind of the invisible hand that guides our decisions and our actions, and also helps us withhold the harmful impulses we might have towards each other. So in families where they're really intentional about culture, instead of me hearing from you something that triggers me and think, well, you're the favored sibling, so of course you'd think that, I withhold that and say, is that going to be helpful to build you up and to build us stronger together? And may I actually pause at that point and say, can you help me understand a little bit more about why you feel that way?
Yeah.
That's building culture, because it's saying, I care more about understanding you than I do about judging you. I care more about helping you and having empathy for you and your circumstances than I do about winning.
Yeah.
That's culture.
Yeah, there's one tool that we use in our perception management toolbox. You're actually describing it in the examples you give. So, often we get emotionally triggered because of something somebody said.
Yeah.
Sometimes what they say is a conclusion that they drew too early.
Yeah.
They don't have enough information available. But then if that emotional trigger comes, I want to punch back, or I'll disengage and walk away. But this whole idea of, we talk about DIR, describing first, then only concluding and interpreting, and then connecting that to an emotion. How do you feel about what we just discussed? And we often find that exactly what you just said, going back and, hey, can you explain where you're coming from? Or can you tell me more about how you ended up thinking this way? And not being triggered or driven by the emotions that might unleash, especially if there is some baggage where there is a repeat of that same pattern.
Yeah.
Undoing that really requires us to go back to, tell me the backstory. Where did this come from? And filling in the descriptive details so that we both get a fuller picture of understanding from your perspective and from my perspective.
Well, I confess, because we've worked together, DIR is actually part of the toolkit I use with families. It's been so powerful because it has done exactly that. Yeah. It stopped people rushing to judgment and a triggered response that has built up over generations. And remember, in organizations, you'll get a lot of turnover. You might be in an organization for 5 years, but in families, you're there for life. And so these patterns of behavior take a long time to undo. And providing tools like DIR, and I use the emotional intelligence profiling that KnowledgeWorks provides and helps me with. They're all such good tools to help people grow in self-awareness and help them see that actually I need to look at myself, do the inner work if I want us to grow stronger together as a family.
Yeah. That's great. Now, you've already touched on a number of more sort of technical steps that you take, and it also sounds like every family is different. But what are some typical steps that you take in those 4 macro level steps that you've already explained at the beginning? So what does it look like? Yeah.
So at the beginning of the journey, the me phase, for example, I'll start the process with an intake assessment, a family strength assessment. It's about 70 questions based that I've refined over the last 3 or 4 years that help me get an understanding of where the family is strong and where they may need to develop. And every individual completes that. And then what we can do is look at the individuals and see where they might be needing to grow. And then we look at the family overall where they need to grow. The power of that tool is that it's them critiquing themselves rather than me as the expert saying, here's what's wrong. Right. And so it then creates this wonderful conversation when we come to the we about how they deal with those things. There's things to do with people's character and identity in there. There's things to do with our relational strength, things to do with our governance as well, and our succession planning. They're more technical areas, but they're important. That's an intake assessment, if you like, and provides a baseline. I then also do, as I mentioned, the Agile EQ assessments to help people develop their own sense of understanding and awareness. That includes debriefs with every individual in the family. So, if it's a large family of, say, 20, I'm now meeting with 20 people, usually 3 or 4 times in that me phase. And we'll do love languages. That's a helpful tool as well. Sometimes strength finders, different tools that help people just grow in their insights and understanding. I'll also just get the backstory of every person and partly my goal is to make sure I know the individuals better than anybody else does. Because when I get into the we phase, which is about bringing the family together, I need to know all the pieces that might actually come out, and also need to know the things that do need to be brought out. Right. And so in the we, so the me work is much more individual conversations and tools. The we is much more around getting the family together. And sometimes it begins with a look back. Where have we got to? What are the narratives that are really painful in our family that we've always brushed under the carpet? Inevitably, there are things that people have formed assumptions about one another, and their responses to each other are based on sometimes faulty information or information that's 10 years old. Yeah. And they haven't allowed one another to grow and become different people, as we all do through our life. And so a lot of it is about looking back, sometimes going through a forgiveness journey, saying, actually, is there things you need to forgive and let go of? That's hard. And that can bring about, a lot of emotional anxiety and challenges. And sometimes that's where other providers, experts might be involved, sometimes psychologists and counselors who can provide specialist expertise where that's needed.
Yeah.
But the we work is really about having the family come together, build trust and understanding. We practice things like DIR. We practice things like reflective listening, which helps us grow better at how we understand each other. We rehearse that. We practice it. We do it every time we meet. We also work on who do we want to be as a family, which is really the essence of culture. Who do we want to be? Not what do we want to do, who do we want to become? And we think about those cultural developments or attributes that we want to characterize our family. So we do that work in the we work. Yeah.
So it's interesting you mentioned 4 different assessments. One, the intake assessment you've developed yourself, and then even some psychometric tools, which is quite a wide variety. So all the way from emotional intelligence to strength finders to even love languages. I'm just curious, why did you land on that cocktail? Because I'm familiar with love languages. I've even used it in our family, but to use it professionally in an environment like yours, tell me a bit more about that.
Well, I mean, part of the insights to these tools obviously came through my relationship with you and my understanding of knowledge works and the things you provide that help conversations of substance. But I was also thinking that because my clients are family units where they have so many other dimensions that are emotional that need to be unpacked, and I needed to have tools that could help trigger and have those conversations. And so, the DISC profiling is great, but the Agile EQ is a sort of a more focus on the emotional responses, and that was helpful in a family context. Love languages likewise. I thought in some ways I'm a little tool agnostic, although they're all helpful, because the goal of the tool is to create the conversation, the insights and the conversation. And if I've got common language created through the tools, it's so much easier. And people have a sense of, oh, that's me, and I can be okay about me.
Yeah.
So when people, for example, do the Agile EQ, they often say, is this okay? Is this where am I okay? Is that good? Is it bad?
Yeah.
Because you are where you are. That's you.
Yeah.
Embrace it.
Yeah.
Now let's help you embrace that and bring that to the conversations with the family, knowing that actually if you only stay in that place, you may not be able to bridge into other conversations that are necessary.
Yeah.
So it's really about getting people to grow in empathy and appreciation of others. So that's it is a cocktail, but sometimes people are struggling with the sense that I just don't know what I'm good at. So that's why strength finders can be helpful, and other tools as well.
Yeah, and I think also what I see time and again, tools like that are, helping people also with a neutral language, and it shows them. You mentioned it already that it's not about how high I score or where I should be. It's where I am, and this is what I need to embrace, as you just mentioned, and that creates that freedom to just engage, to be yourself, and to engage.
Yeah.
So you use an upfront assessment. You might use some psychometric tools as you move into the journey. You already shared a few stories. What else have you seen? Because you mentioned the dad versus the kids. I assume sometimes you even work with more than 2 generations. So I'm curious, as you work with families around the world, right? So how is it? How are some of those stories potentially different?
Okay, so here's one out of the UK again, a family that went through and is still sort of working through the journey. But when we did the me and the we work, and what that revealed is that the individual, so that the mum and dad and then some kids, the kids are in their 30s. When I did the individual work with the kids in their branches, because some of them are married, it was very clear that what they wanted for their future was different. This really comes to the where work, so the me, we, where. And as I looked at what each individual branch wanted for their family, for themselves, they were different. And so we were able to have a really good conversation about, hey, is there, do these different desires or aspirations, how will they work if we keep them all together? And the answer was, actually, it may not work.
Interesting.
So do we want to keep it all together, or do we want to think about an independent future? So they've gone through the process of actually demerging their business and the assets. The children have taken their portion and are now building their own things. And the parents still have a significant residual, which they'll need to work out what to do with through their estate. But it was an acknowledgement that actually we don't want to run together or own together everything that's been built, because that may not be best for our relationships. And we've got our own things we want to do.
Yeah.
So it's freeing for them to think we don't have to have this collective future. Not every family is free to do that, because some families are structured in a way that's just not possible.
Yeah.
But what it did allow us to do is actually have the conversation, what really matters to you, where are you going, and how can we help you do that? Because the greatest goal of the family isn't taking care of its wealth, it's taking care of each other. And so if the wealth stops us doing that, we need to find another way. Yeah. And so in this way, it was possible to do, if you like, a demerger. That doesn't stop them being collective as a family. They can still do family, shared family services, which they're doing. They can still have family gatherings, and they can have some family social activities and even giving activities and other things. It just means their main economic activities are now separate. So that's a good example of where the where, when you look at the collective and the individual, really makes sense.
Yeah. So in other words, there isn't a formula.
And I think that's the risk, isn't it? Because so much of the industry says you must keep a dynastic future for your family, because if you don't, you're robbing them. Well, my argument is you're not really robbing your kids. You've given them a great foundation to build. The best things we do in life, we build ourselves or build with others.
Yeah.
It's much more fun to build something than to receive something and be a caretaker. So how about you give your kids some building blocks to go and build their future and see what they can do with it?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's a much more fun journey than just taking care of the assets somebody else has built.
It's really interesting. And which continents have you had a chance to work on? Is it every continent except for Antarctica?
Yeah, well, almost. So I do work in Europe and the UK, in the US. Here in Dubai, I'm working with families from the region, some from India and Pakistan, and even families from parts of Africa. So it is a wide range. So I have had the chance to look at the sort of cross-section of the way different families do things.
That's great. Now, the generational differences, we quickly touched on that, but what are you seeing? Are there global trends that you see amongst families? Shifts in the way they think, shifts in the way maybe the younger generation thinks. Anything you could share about that?
Yeah, I think so. Some of the families from this part of the world and maybe in the Asia are much more collective in their thinking. So we'll just talk briefly generationally, and then there is much more collective future obligation. It's a communal focus.
Yeah.
And so when kids go off and get educated in usually America or the UK or elsewhere, they come back with much more individualistic mindsets, which is, hey, you are your future. It's in your hands. You do what you want. And so that can be a wrestle. The parents saying, well, you have some responsibilities. And they're saying, well, thanks, but I want to do my own thing. So that tension, I think a trend would be that because families of wealth who have maybe traditionally been community-oriented, tribal-oriented, and now seeing their kids come back with a more individualistic mindset, wrestling to know what that means for how they transition their wealth into the next generation. Because the kids come back and saying, well, this is a great foundation, but I want to do my own thing. Thanks very much. I don't want to feel stifled by the family's expectations of me. So part of the tension I help families navigate is this, that in this difference between my own aspirations and the family's communal vision, collective vision, I want to fuel people's desire and aspiration for their own thing. That's important. If they don't feel I have that, they just feel stifled, and they'll just be compliant with the family, but ultimately resent that. On the other hand, we don't want them to neglect the responsibilities they have to their parents and to the family and to the assets that have been created. So just helping them navigate that tension is key. I think the other thing that I would say is that kids are coming out of university now with a greater desire, not just to accumulate more wealth, but to actually be more impactful with that wealth. And so their their drive for meaning and purpose is greater, I think, than their parents' was. And that's hard for parents who are saying, well, we built our business on coal. Kids are saying, well, thanks, but we don't, that's not aligned with my beliefs. That's not aligned with my values. We can't continue doing that. The parents are saying, well, that's what we've always done. So I think that sense of social impact and the need for meaning and purpose in what I do is an increasing driver that's changing the shape of portfolios in families. As this next generation take the reins of those portfolios, they'll be asking, as they already are, their portfolio managers, show us how this is making a difference to the things I care about. Meaning returns, if you like, more than just financial returns.
when you describe that, you're actually saying that you see that as a trend with across the continents.
Absolutely, yeah. I've seen it with every generation and every continent. Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah. 2 weeks ago, I met a gentleman who is right in the middle of that tension as the oldest son. And he described to me how he felt that there was no room to have that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, he's in a commitment now to the business and to the family. And I asked him, so when do you think your family would be willing to have that conversation again?
Mm-hmm.
He said, well, I need to be in for 5 years now.
Yeah. Wow.
And he had sort of made peace with it.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't have been his first choice.
Well, it's common that there's a story of some business here or in the region with some of their kids who are saying to the father, hey, why are we growing so much? Why? What are you trying to achieve? You're close to your retirement age. What's the point of all of this?
Mm-hmm.
They're asking, what's the point?
Yeah.
And I don't think he knows the point, other than the only way and this is true for many, the only way they need to know to value their life's work and to feel like they are making progress is through the growth of their assets or their business. And so if you say, hey, that's not success, and kids are saying that's not success for us, then that really rips out their foundations of what is.
Mm.
So I think it's a very, very, it's a conversation I navigate a lot, trying to understand the drivers of the parents,
mm-hmm.
often the parents, who are saying growth, growth, growth. And the kids are saying, what's the point? What's it all for?
Yeah.
What's the purpose of this wealth? If it's not to achieve the things we care about in the world, what's the point?
Yeah.
If we're just making money, which we maybe just then give away, well, that's great. But actually, we want to make money that in a way that makes a difference to the things we care about.
Yeah.
Much more integrated.
So is that more moving away from hardcore enterprise to more social enterprise, maybe?
I think it is. And I think, when you see family members who have access to private equity funds or venture capital funds in their families, as many now do, what ventures they're giving birth to are much more socially driven. I can think of at least 3 or 4 where the kids say, obviously we want this to be a financial success, but the reason we're doing it is because we want to, restore health and well-being to this community, or we want to, do these things that will actually protect and preserve some of the environment that we're concerned about. So there's always a social story, not just a business story.
Yeah.
Now, some of them have the luxury of capital they would probably never have if they had to go and compete for it in the open market.
Sure.
So there is that, and some of the parents will say, well, it's great they've got their cause and their impact, but this has got to make money. And it's true, it does. I mean, these things, they need to actually be self-sustaining.
It can't just be a pet project.
No, but nonetheless, it is interesting to see when given the opportunity to create something, they're creating things that are impactful and in ways that matter to them, that mean something to them.
And it's really hopeful to hear that.
I think so too.
Yeah. So they do have a lot that they are responsible for, and should be, but also will, in the bigger scheme of things, be held accountable for. So it's great to hear that those trends into transformation and impact that's happening. As you're sharing the stories, you've alluded already to this idea of am I accountable to the family, to the community, or can I be accountable to myself? And where people get educated, what they get exposed to. So that's one of our 12 dimensions on the cultural mapping inventory. There's another one that I was thinking about, is that whole idea of how you become. You become by achieving something, or you become because it's been ascribed to you. And you have the same dilemma with in a much different way, but if you're the son of the soccer coach, you are ascribed to be the son of the soccer coach. If you're the child of the religious leader, if you are the son of the king, etc. But in these families, it sounds like there's that same dilemma. So we talked a little bit about, they want to go and achieve for themselves. Talk a little bit more about the pressure of being ascribed to be the child of. Yeah. What does that do to people, and how do they deal with that?
Yeah, so I have these conversations often in families. Parents who have gone to great lengths to give their children freedom say, you're a different person to me. You don't have to be me. Go and be you, which is a wonderful thing. And many parents I work with believe that, and they do want their children to do that. The trouble is the kids don't feel it because they feel a pressure to be like their parents. They feel the pressure from everybody else. They feel, gee, I thought you'd be more than you are given the family you've come from. And that sense of, I just don't feel like I'm enough given all that has been invested in me. I should be more than I am.
Yeah.
That is so common and so crushing. And it's the narrative of failure that runs through so many, I think. The narrative even that I have to, feeling like an imposter. I don't belong here. I'm not worthy of what I've received. And that is really crushing. So I think for helping parents realize how crushing it is or potentially crushing it is, not because of what they've said necessarily, the narrative they have themselves and also what they might hear from their friends. So you're always living in the shadow of the achievements of others. And what I want to help people say is, hey, look, success isn't the scale of what has been created before. Success has been faithful to create impact with whatever you've been given to create impact with.
Yeah.
And enjoy that. It may be that you're a teacher and you get to impact 25 kids a year and see them grow over that year.
Yeah.
Enjoy that and take great pride in that impact because you're using your gifts to actually help others do better in life.
But you're also, put the finger on something fundamental, is that identity is not in what you have. It's knowing who you are.
Yeah.
And knowing how you can bring that to bear on the world. And I think also the narrative, you talked about that multiple times in our conversation today, that what narratives are running through the family, what conversations are parents having with their children, and how that shapes identity, as opposed to, you're the son of,
absolutely,
or the daughter of. How to get from just being ascribed to actually having a firm identity that might exist even if the wealth wasn't there.
Yeah, that's the key, isn't it? I think you've highlighted exactly the work I try and do with Next Gen in families and that we've done together actually in some of the work we've done together. But that's so key because if I rely on my ascribed identity, I'll always doubt myself and I'll always feel like I'm only safe in the tribe and I'll always feel resentful because I'm still dependent on the tribe, if you like.
Yeah.
But if I actually have the chance to grow my confidence and understand, that's why I do a lot of this intake work. If I get a chance to say, hey, I'm uniquely made, I've got great gifts, I want to actually help people with those gifts. And if I do that, that'll be satisfying and rewarding. And if I can see that as success rather than accumulation as success, then actually that's my measuring stick. I can feel good about that. Yeah. And what I want the families to do is say, let's change the narrative of what we celebrate. So when family gatherings happen, typically it's a review of the family's business and the portfolio and things going up, and that's great. And so we're celebrating that. The trouble is what it says is that's success.
Right.
And so what I encourage families to do is say, no, when you get together, it's important to have a business update. But let's do that after we've done the personal updates. Let's hear what people have been doing in their lives, the sort of wins they've been having. If somebody's, gotten through a difficult time, or if somebody's taken on a new job, or somebody's seen success in whatever field or vocation they've chosen. Yeah. Let's talk and celebrate those things and make that the focus. And really a byproduct or a secondary element should be the business. Because remember, the fruit of the business is simply a tool. The profits we generate should be considered a tool to achieve all those other things that matter, rather than a goal in itself.
Yeah.
It's not a good goal in itself.
It's sort of shifting away from the doing to the being.
Yeah.
A lot more.
The who, we've used this phrase together before, but the who before the do.
Yeah.
So get people to really think about who they are and who they want to become. When I'm getting families in their where work to work that out, I get them to think about the where in a few ways. I get them to think about who they want to become as a family. I say, hey, look, fast forward 10 years with your kids, what would you like to be able to say about your family? Yeah. That we still talk to each other, we love each other, we're always there for each other. Well, think about what you're wanting to become as a family, and now think about the ingredients that will get you there. You've got to have, share dinners together, care for each other, all those sort of ingredients and habits. But the who piece dominates. Who do you want to become as a person? Who do you want to become? Who do you want your children to become? Many families want their kids to kind of be able to be resilient and able to make it in the world. Yeah. But actually, they raise them in a zoo. And they provide them all of the comforts they need, so there's all the risk is taken out. And so they're surprised when the kids are, is ones who are dependent and not able to make it on their own.
Yeah.
So starting with the who we want to become is the fundamental question for all of this. It's really a question of character.
Yeah.
Character of the family, which is really culture, character of the individual, which is their identity and sense of purpose and what they do.
Raising them in a zoo. That we use the 3 colors of worldview is one of the tools we use. And this whole idea behind it is that you create cultures where all 3 worldview drivers can become present. Mm-hmm. So instead of, super protective, which actually in what you just described becomes disempowering to people. It becomes inhibiting. As opposed to that, how do we create a culture that's empowering and that's life-giving to its members? How do we honor the individuals, the family, what has been entrusted to us? How do we do right by one another from a governance, policy, procedure, estate planning, etc. point of view? So this litmus test that we call this idea of behind the 3 colors of worldview, creating cultures where you do right by people, you honor people, and you're empowering the way you engage with one another, the way you make decisions. If you take that sort of as a summary of the cultures to create, can you talk more about that? How have you seen people shift to doing right by each other, to honoring the individual, the family, the estate, the bigger cause, to become empowering as opposed to, deliberating, to disempower?
Yeah. Now, let me share a negative story first and then maybe turn it into a positive, or at least find a positive story. But this is not an uncommon situation where a strong founder who has built a significant business and has kept a tight control over everything in the business and everything in the family. So the rules he's used or she's used to build their business and their fortune, they bring those into the family, and it's very directed, and it's very controlling, and it's very, very power and fear based. If I step out of line, maybe I'll be pushed out of the family, or I won't get what everybody else gets. Massive imbalance of power in families of wealth like these, because so much of they feel like their future depends on what the founder decides. And so that's an unhealthy culture that is too focused on power, and everything goes up.
Yeah.
And everybody feels like their future is entirely dependent on that person who holds all the power.
Yeah.
And so in the families where I get to work over a long time, I get to say, hey, your future isn't dependent on what he or she decides for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you've got and discovered now your own sense of purpose and your own sense of identity, and you are building your own economic future that isn't just dependent on handouts from the family, then actually you can actually approach your father or mother or parents as a peer, or a partner instead of a parent. And so many families operate, even with kids in their 60s and 40s and 60s, as a hierarchical family model.
Wow.
And it shouldn't be that way. What should happen is it should become a partner and a peer model. Sure, they're still your parents, you'll honor them. But instead of the power all residing in that one branch, the generation above, it ought to be a power sharing model. And so helping families through that, and I've seen that's a pretty hard battle actually, because to shift that perspective. Yeah. But where I have seen that, the family I mentioned earlier about the kids where they said, what did you do with my father? I think they've actually managed that. I think they've managed to create a partnership model for the way they run their family now.
Yeah.
That actually appropriately uses power. It honors the individual, but recognizes there is authority in the father. And I think they've done it in a really, really healthy way. But that, to me, is where families ought to move towards.
And I think that's also something you can pass on to the next generation and the next generation.
Yeah.
Because that super hierarchical, all power resides with the person at the top. Eventually, it disintegrates.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, especially if you then move to a multi-branch model, it can't be. Yeah. So you've got to kind of. There was one family I'm working with, and I was talking about these issues and the need for a transition from the sort of hierarchical model to much more of a peer and partner model. And I said, look, while you are alive, you can help bring that about, because we need the kids to work that way. And he said, to use the cricket analogy, you mean we need to bat in a few overs before the innings begins. That's to, for those who don't know cricket.
Forgive you for being an Australian.
But the reality was that he needed to have his kids practicing a partnership model with him as a partner, not the director. before he died. Now, 4 days after that conversation, he died.
Wow.
And so we're now having to piece together a partnership model. They've never had experience of it. They've never known it because he's always been the power figure.
Yeah.
And so bringing that power, healthy use of power, and honoring the individual, but also recognizing authority, that's the tension.
Yeah.
I guess another one would be around honor and shame, and right and wrong. A situation where a father was needing to move his son out of a role in the business, and because he was not appropriate to run it anymore. Now, a lot of shame associated with that.
Yeah.
So anyway, a deal was done, if you like, that enabled that to happen. But in the process of the deal, so the son's out of that role.
Right.
In the process of the deal, he was provided a bonus that was probably well in excess of what would be commercially realistic or explainable. And so now that one sibling has lost his job. There's some shame, has a bonus though, and now the right and wrong perspective of other siblings saying, that's not fair.
What about me?
What about me? So you can see here the challenge of, trying to honor somebody, but then do it in a way that creates another problem, which is that doesn't seem fair.
Yeah, it's not doing right by everybody.
Exactly. And so, the conversations with the other family members is, hey, listen, you need to understand try and understand the perspective of your father and what he was trying to achieve.
Yeah.
It may not feel fair to you, but in a sense, it doesn't matter, does it? Because you have more than enough. And it's not like you're going to be deprived because he was provided more. So let's just think about it from an honor perspective. It was a way to honor the son, even though it doesn't feel fair to you. You're not really losing out on anything. But it might feel like it's, in the end, I say, look, some pills feel bitter to swallow. Just swallow it and get on with it, because there's no point letting that ruin your family future.
Yeah. Wow. I really appreciate the examples, the stories you've shared. We've had the privilege of working together. And as you do the work with the families, of course, you get to know their businesses, and that's become the crossover. So not just providing assessments for the family work, but then also working with businesses that these families own, and vice versa. So it's been our privilege to work with companies that are family owned. And then, of course, once family members start to confide in us, we start to hear a little bit of the challenges behind closed doors. And being able to introduce you as a trusted partner has been a lot of joy, and it's been really powerful to sort of cross-pollinate and synergize together that way. So hopefully we'll keep on doing that into the future. But what does the future hold?
Well, just on that, I think that partnership we have with those families where there is a business is so powerful, because actually the family challenges are often brought about through seasons of transition. They're exposed in seasons of transition when kids getting older and think about what's next for my life, what's next for my parents, what are they going to do with the business, what are they going to do with the wealth, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's also true usually and often for the founder, they're in a season of transition and wondering what's next. And so the way where they've run their organization, which is often very dependent on a founder or founding team, it needs to go through a transition to building strong leadership, taking leadership which is centralized into one which is more collaborative. And that's what Knowledge Works does so well, and helping go from personality driven to culture in the organization. So I'm really excited that we've had the chance, and we'll continue to have the chance to do that.
Yeah, and the other thing that really gets me excited is this whole idea that you're busy building the family culture, but it's not always the case that family culture is either clear to the people who run their businesses, sometimes not even clear to the family themselves. And then the business is run in such a radically different way than what the family believes in or wants to stand for. And building that connect between clear understanding of the family culture, but then also allowing that to flow into the way their businesses are run or the way they do philanthropy, etc. I think that creates also a much more sustainable future, but also it gives the family something to be proud of.
Yeah.
When that culture of their family starts to show up in their business, starts to show up in the philanthropy, the way they make decisions, the way they allocate their resources. So how do you see that go into the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think what this work has proven to me is there's an extraordinary need for this type of approach to work with families of wealth. So my hope and dream would be that every family of wealth, actually every family, but every family of wealth, alongside of developing their investment strategy, their philanthropic plan and their estate plan, they actually see of even greater importance the need to create what I would call a well-being and transition strategy for the family, where they actually intentionally do this type of work, but not just as a once-off. They embed it into their family operating system. And so just as they would always review their other parts of their business, for example, they do the same with their family in that sort of with that sort of intentionality. I'd love that to become the norm for every family. Now, how do we do that? I mean, there's not many people doing this work around the world, I've discovered. I thought there would be. There's just not. And so what I'd love to see is more people doing this work. I'd love to see these tools that have been created being used by many more people. Obviously, I can't do all of that work. I don't want to. I want others to do the work. And I'd love to see people coming beside me and saying, hey, how can we do more of this together? And how can I take what you've done and deliver that in my context, wherever it might be? Yeah. So I think there's a great opportunity and a great need.
Yeah, as you're explaining that, I can see your facial expression. For you, it's not just a job.
No, not at all. It's a vocation, really. It's a passion to really see and multiply impact. So I'm driven by impact. I know you are too. Yeah. And when you see impact, it's so rewarding. Now, I mean, impact with financial returns is obviously important, but I'm more excited by impact than I am by financial returns. And so when I get to see families transformed, if you think about the assets that have been transitioned from one generation to the next, depending on the report, there's up to $15 trillion worth of wealth transitioning from one generation to the next over the 10 to 15 years. Wow. Into the hands, I would say, mostly of people who are unprepared for it. And so if we think that is true, that even if it's a fraction of that transition, what difference could it make for that wealth to go into hands of people who know how to have great impact with that wealth and know how to make it sustainable? It's a massive multiplier effect. So I feel like even the work with a few families I do can have a massive impact on the world. And so if we can multiply the number of families we're working with, we can multiply the impact.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. It's really inspiring and a work that's needed in this world. So thank you for stepping into that. So how do people get in contact with you? Either if they want to come alongside you or if they are one of those families and say, I want to talk to Andrew.
Sure. I mean, I'd love to hear from anybody, but probably the easiest is on my website, plenitudepartners.com. It's actually getting updated at the moment, so that people can still find details on there and get in touch that way. Or, of course, if they know you and want to reach out directly, they're welcome to do so.
And as always, we'll share the details in the notes that come with the podcast release. So we'll share your email address, the website. And I look forward to ongoing partnership with Plenitude Partners with you, Andrew. It's been a joy. It's been a lot of fun. We've had a lot of amazing...
we really have, in a lot of locations too, great locations. But no, thank you, Marco. Thank you for the work of Knowledge Works. It actually helps my work in so many other ways, and obviously our partnership too. It's been a real joy. So I look forward to that continuing.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Cultural Agility Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, share it with someone. The best way to help us out is by leaving a review on your favorite podcast app or channel, or forward and recommend this podcast to people around you. As always, if any of the topics we discussed today intrigue you, you will find links to articles discussing them in greater depth in the podcast notes. If you would like to learn more about intercultural intelligence and how you can become more culturally agile, you can find more information and hundreds of articles at knowledgeworks.com. A special thanks to Jason Carter for composing the music on this podcast, and to the whole KnowledgeWorks team for making this podcast a success. Thank you, Nita Rodriguez, Ara Azizbekian, Rajitha Raj, and thanks to Vip and George for audio production, Rosalind Raj for scheduling, and Caleb Strauss for marketing and helping produce this podcast.